You're a distressed investor. You know this kind of scenario well, but you were still surprised by the scope, the magnitude of the moves that we've seen in Argentina today.
Yeah, it was. I mean, back at the beginning of last year, I think that the market in general, emerging market, crossover investors were overweight Argentina. And given the economic problems the country had, some of the troubles that Macri had, the drought, meant I thought that people had squared up their positions. But the fact that the sell-off in terms of magnitude was pretty much the differential between Macri and Fernandez, that's a big move. And I wasn't alone in being surprised how bad the move was.
Recession, austerity, inflation, interest rates skyrocketing. It wasn't as though Macri was a safe pair of hands. Why does the market deem him so much better than Alberto Fernandez?
Oh, wow. That's a very fair question. And I think that a lot of it just had to do with the expectations that he had coming in after Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, that the Kirchners had mismanaged the economy so badly that there was all this goodwill. And the language that Macri and his team spoke was the language that Wall Street understands. In fact, a lot of them had come from Wall Street. So I think people just see him as better than the alternative. Now, Cristina decided to run as a vice president with Alberto Fernandez, but I think in terms of we shouldn't have been that surprised because Macri came in promising that he was going to solve all the problems, and he hasn't. So I think the general population has probably gotten very disaffected. But it's important to note that only one poll showed anything close to this differential. Yeah. I mean, most of the polls were single digits. One poll had a 12 to 13% gap. It turned out closer to 15.
Imagine that poll's not really reflecting what's going on the ground.
You're speaking to a Brit. I mean,
something that we've experienced plenty of times since the summer of 2016. You mentioned that you were taken aback by the magnitude of the moves, so were others. Talk a little bit about the crowding into Argentinian assets. Who is invested in Argentina right now? Are they hedge funds? Are they institutional investors, pension funds, individual investors?
I think most emerging market people, I mean, if you think about the borrowing that the Macri administration did when they first came in, they raised billions upon billions of dollars. So most emerging market firms got exposure with the additional borrowing they did. But I would say, broadly speaking, not individual investors, but virtually every single emerging market fund that you can look at will have Argentina exposure. It's a very heavy weighting in the index. So if you're tracking the index, you're invested in Argentina. Hedge funds, crossover guys. I mean, now that even after the sell-off, you can get yields approaching the mid-teens. On the short end of the curve, it's over 30%. On the long end, it's anywhere from sort of 12 to 14%. So those are very attractive, distressed.
Kind of irresistible.
Yeah. Well, but even back on Friday, you're looking at something close to double digits.
Yeah.
So it was, it looked like it was worth the risk, but the magnitude of this loss, I think, spooked a lot of people.
What's the worst case scenario, and do you think it will come to bear? Do you think that these sorts of sell-off is necessary and a good reflection on what could happen?
Worst case scenario, listen, we were better buyers this morning, given the magnitude of the move. I think whenever you see something gap down like this, it's usually not a good time to stick your toe in the water, if not your foot. But the worst case scenario is pretty daunting. You could get a sort of a return to the interventionist policies of the Kirchner administrations. Kichilov might decide that his antipathy towards the market is very deep-rooted.
Okay, talk a little bit more about him. Why is he such a central player, and what do we need to know about him?
I mean, he's been with the Kirchner group for a long time. He's a bit strident, but he's not. I mean, to flip it around, I mean, he's been there, he's a loyalist. He did very well in the gubernatorial election, so, chances are he's going to be involved in the political dialogue going forward. But neither he nor, Fernandez are stupid in any ways. And, it'll be interesting to see if they do prevail. And I think that Macri, saying that he's going to turn around and make this work, he's being a bit too optimistic. I think the chances, he'd really have to draw an inside straight to, get into a second round in October and then prevail in November. There just don't seem to be enough votes to pick up. But I think that people might be surprised, like they were with Lula for a while, that wait a second, these guys kind of learned not to be off the radar screen of the international financial system, play ball. They probably learned something in the, quite a long time that Nestor and Christina ran the show.
Such currency crisis, such sell-offs in your FX probably focuses the mind a little bit as to what can and can't be achieved. What do you think about the relationship with the IMF going forward? Because that was a really important bailout.
Yeah, and Ms. Lagarde, I think, left her acting head, David Lipton, a bit of a bit of a present. What is it, $56 billion? I think that there's no question that they've been speaking to the people in the Fernandez camp, but I think that they, like many other people in the market, were just hoping that, okay, we know it's a coin toss, but it's going to come up mockery eventually. Now they have to start really doing some game planning. But it'll be difficult. I mean, regardless of who takes over the presidency of Argentina is going to have a tough road, going forward.
And it's on that point I want to pick up. I'm going to ask a really obvious question. Why is it always that Argentina seems to be in some sort of crisis? The country has natural resources, so it's got stuff to work with. So it must be a matter of governance, but no matter who's in charge, it seems to always end up in dire straits.
My knee-jerk answer to that question would get me a number of headlines on Bloomberg, so I'll probably back off.
Give us the politic answer then.
No, I think it's you can make a very long argument about the tradition of Peronism, that you got a lot of the population thinking that they could get something for nothing. So the kind of reforms that you need to undertake to make an economy function weren't reforms that the Argentine population was willing to take. And when things get tough, one, they seem to have some bad luck.
The drought, for instance.
The drought really created some problems. But it's fair to say, I guess, it's a beautiful country with a ton of natural resource, and it's populated by Argentines. So, it's amazing. Back in the old days, I think we all expected Argentina to have problems, but they come back more often than you expect. You'd expect the problems to flare up every decade. Now it's happening every year or two. I mean, somebody modeled out in probability, doing an actuarial table, how many times Argentina will have to restructure their 100-year bond. And per the actuarial tables, 8 times in the next century.